From the very beginning, humanity walked through obstacles and adversity. How could such a fragile being survive in a world that seemed designed to destroy it? Our ancestors, on their way to becoming human, were little more than a spark of hope on a challenging Earth. Life was a daily battle against hunger and fear, and only the strongest managed to endure. Survival demanded creativity and an unshakable will. The real advantage lay in the ability to adapt, in how quickly they learned, and in the strength of their connections with others. Love became the invisible force that held groups together and gave them reasons to keep living. At first, it was only a brief impulse, but over time the encounter stopped being a fleeting moment and began to deepen. In that unexpected spark began the path that would one day lead us to become human. Era of fragility, 4.2 million years ago, Australopithecus. Across the vast landscapes of Africa emerged the first recognizable figures in our evolutionary story, the Australopithecus. They lived in regions that today make up eastern and southern Africa, stretching from Ethiopia and Kenya down to South Africa. There, among scattered woodlands and open plains, they had to learn how to move through an environment in constant flux. Life for Australopithecus balanced on a fragile line between opportunity and danger. Their small size and limited physical strength left them vulnerable to countless predators. They lacked sharp fangs, powerful claws, and the speed needed to flee in time. Their strategy relied on constant alertness, staying together in groups, and retreating quickly into trees. Community life offered shared vigilance, better chances of finding food, and support in raising their young. Trees remained a constant ally. Their bodies still had the agility needed to climb and evade ground-dwelling hunters. Their diet was mostly vegetarian: fruits, leaves, seeds, roots, and bark. At times, they ate small vertebrates and insects. In the rivers, where they went to drink or gather aquatic fruits, enormous crocodiles lurked, ready to strike in an instant. Their overwhelming strength and crushing jaws posed a grave threat to any creature that wandered too close to the water's edge. These reptiles were heirs to ancient lineages, survivors from the age of the dinosaurs. Their bodies were built for ambush, with armor-like skin and powerful muscles, primed to attack without warning. On the savannas, saber-tooths were a silent and relentless danger. Their method relied on stalking from the cover of vegetation and launching themselves swiftly at an unsuspecting victim. When a saber-tooth managed to seize an Australopithecus, the outcome was almost always fatal. Their long, specialized fangs were made to pierce the throat or abdomen, causing a swift death. The youngest and most defenseless were often the ones taken, youngsters who strayed too far from the safety of the group. Their bodies still lacked the strength to climb quickly or the stamina to flee over long distances. Infant mortality was high, and each loss struck painfully at the heart of the group's chances of survival. Within the vulnerability of their young lay paradoxically one of the earliest seeds of our humanity. Protecting them required empathy. A single mother couldn't watch her offspring every moment, nor gather food while the little one demanded her attention. But the group acted as one. Every member took part in raising and defending the young. And within that shared care emerged something new. The beginnings of solidarity, affection, and a sense of belonging. Social relationships among Australopithecus were complex. Encounters were brief, driven more by biology than by emotional attachment. The female entered a period of receptivity. Her scent, gestures, and movements drew attention. The dominant male asserted his strength, using his status to secure access and opportunities. Yet, he didn't hold absolute control. In the shadows of the group, females chose as well. Sometimes they sought another male, one young, agile, and dependable enough to help protect their offspring. A quick mating hidden from watchful eyes ensured genetic variety and a greater chance of survival. Some Australopithecus populations began to leave the fragmented forest behind and ventured permanently into the open savannas of eastern Africa. Here, every day was a gamble between life and death, yet a subtle difference emerged. Skilled hands and bold minds. The frail prey was about to become a creator. Era of invention, 2 million years ago. Homo habilis. The forests shrank while the savannas spread. In this changing landscape, an unexpected opportunity appeared: the massive carcasses left behind by predators. Thus, Homo habilis learned to use stone as a tool to slice through hide and break open bones. With this came something irreversible: a growing dependence on technology. From that moment on, no hominin would ever live without tools. Homo habilis tracked the hunts of large predators, and once the danger moved off, they rushed in to claim the remains. What was mere waste to the great hunters became a feast for them. But scavenging was a perilous resource. A predator could return at any moment to reclaim its kill. That constant threat shaped their behavior. They learned to cooperate, with some standing guard, while others cut. Sharp stones allowed them to slice meat quickly and crack open bones. The brain of Homo habilis expanded over time, and that growth brought a new way of thinking. They crafted their tools with precision and control, striking one stone against another. Each blow required imagining the final shape before it even existed, predicting the edge hidden within the rock. This marked the beginning of a mind no longer bound to the present, one that learned from the past and envisioned the future. That expanding brain also transformed group life. With a growing ability to read gestures, voices, and emotions, Homo habilis improved the way they communicated. The earliest steps toward language emerged in an ancient murmur, with guttural sounds and gestures filled with intention. Within their groups, survival depended on coordinating actions, warning of danger, claiming food, defending space, calling to their young. Different tones appeared, some signaling urgency or calm, others expressing dominance or submission. Across the lands roamed Gomphotheres and Deinotheres, giants with massive bodies who shared the territory with Homo habilis. Moving in herds, they carved paths through thick brush, knocked over young trees, and opened clearings in the vegetation. Without meaning to, they reshaped the savanna. For early hominins, those trails became opportunities. Following their tracks led them to new water sources, to areas with fresh food, or to safer territories. Yet life in Eastern Africa was shaped not only by predators and massive animals, the land itself was an unpredictable foe. The Great Rift Valley was a deep wound carved into the continent. From its depths rose fiery roars, volcanic eruptions that blanketed entire regions in ash. Those gray mantles erased landscapes, hid food, and forced groups to migrate into the unknown. The climate set its own trials as well. Prolonged droughts turned rivers into dry channels and grass into dust. For months, thirst was the most feared threat. Then, without warning, torrential rains arrived. The same waters that brought life could become deadly. Sudden floods swept across the savanna, carrying everything away in their path. But these hardships did not halt the advance of ingenuity. From fragility would rise resilience. From the spark of invention, the drive to conquer. And so a new traveler would emerge, the first capable of leaving Africa and claiming the world, an explorer without limits. Era of exploration, 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus. This ancestor was taller, stronger, and more resilient. His body was built to endure long days under the sun, travel endlessly across the savanna, and withstand extreme climates. He carried a sturdy skeleton, muscles fit for long treks, and a fully upright posture. Endurance hunting became his greatest weapon. He didn't need the pouncing power of a feline or the ambush tactics of a crocodile. His strategy was different. Pursue the prey under the blazing sun until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Groups of erectus hurled stones from a distance to harass their target. When the animal finally fell, drained of strength, they finished it with double-edged hand axes. For the first time, a hominin didn't flee from predators. He became one. Homo erectus was the first to tame a force that had always been feared: fire. Perhaps it began after a storm, when lightning struck a tree and left its branches burning. At first, the group kept their distance. The flames were light and destruction intertwined. But little by little, they dared to come closer, drawn by the warmth and by the protection that kept predators away. Maybe someone picked up a burning branch and kept it alive through the night. That moment marked an irreversible turning point. For the first time, an animal didn't merely survive fire, it claimed it. Fire gave them warmth on cold nights, light in darkness, protection from predators, and a new flavor in cooked meat. The pressure of living in a world full of megafauna shaped the evolution of Homo erectus, both his brain and abilities. Surrounded by predators like the giant hyena, he was forced to develop an increasingly precise memory. Remembering where the hyena lurked, or in which clearing it had attacked a companion, was a matter of life and death. To coordinate defense and offense, Erectus developed more complex forms of communication: signals, gestures, and sounds. He also faced other hominins, such as late Australopithecus and Homo habilis. This wasn't a brief encounter, but a coexistence that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. With Homo habilis, the conflict was direct. Both species used tools, both scavenged carcasses, and both hunted small animals. That similarity in survival strategies forced them to overlap in hunting grounds, inevitably leading to confrontation. When a group of habilis found a carcass abandoned by a predator, they knew they had to act fast: cut, break bones, carry off whatever they could. But if a group of erectus appeared at that moment, the tension became unbearable. Habilis fought back with stones and sticks, yet the strength, superior tools, and organization of erectus usually prevailed. Little by little, Homo habilis groups were pushed into marginal areas, until eventually their lineage disappeared. But the most extraordinary quality of Homo erectus was his wandering spirit. While other species remained bound to Africa, Erectus ventured into the unknown. From his origins in eastern Africa, he spread across northern and southern Africa. In western Africa, no fossils had been found, yet his hand tools, such as bifacial axes, have appeared. In this region occurred the largest asteroid collision in hominin times, the Bossum Twi impact, in what is now Ghana. A rocky body fell from the sky and unleashed unimaginable energy. The ground shook, forests ignited, and a massive crater opened in the heart of the jungle. For the Homo erectus living there, that cataclysm must have been beyond comprehension. The African climate of this period was unpredictable, marked by long droughts and torrential rains that left rivers dry and resources scarce. Huge herds of herbivores moved constantly in search of fresh grass and water. Homo erectus, tough and built for long distances, had no choice but to follow them. From eastern Africa, he crossed the Nile Corridor and the Sinai Desert, reaching the Mediterranean Levant and the Caucasus. In Eurasia, he had to cover his body to withstand the cold. At first, he relied on what he could gather: hides taken from hunted animals or recovered from carcasses. Over time, he learned to clean the hides, dry them over the fire, and wrap his body more effectively. He no longer relied solely on natural shelters. He carried his own protection against the climate. Thanks to this innovation, Homo erectus reached places once inaccessible and survived in regions where winter was fatal to other hominins. In Eurasian lands, he crossed paths with gigantic creatures, including the woolly rhinoceroses, Coelodonta antiquitatis. These colossal beings may have inspired the earliest forms of awe, fear, and reverence. Such massive animals were not just meat. They were forces of nature, perhaps the first spirits or gods in the imagination of early humans. Confronting them was an extreme risk. Their speed and strength could end a life in an instant. However, the carcasses they left behind after attacks from other predators became an unprecedented source of food. The Eurasian megafauna also pushed Erectus to refine his weapons for both defense and offense. They crafted sturdier hand axes and fire-hardened spears, tools that acted as extensions of their own bodies. One of the giant carnivores they faced was the primitive cave lion, a beast larger and more powerful than modern lions. This predator did not hunt alone. Its coordinated groups ambushed hominins in the very places where they searched for food or water. Encountering one of these hunters in open ground almost always meant death. From Eurasia, Homo erectus expanded into India, China, and even the Indonesian archipelago. They are believed to have reached distant places, like the island of Java, by taking advantage of lowered sea levels. Yet an astonishing possibility remains. Homo erectus may have been the first navigator among our ancestors. Perhaps they built simple rafts to cross the sea, driven by the need to explore new territories. In Java and nearby islands, they lived alongside colossal animals, including giant monitor lizards, the direct ancestors of the Komodo dragon. These reptiles were formidable predators, ambushing with stealth and delivering bites filled with bacteria to weaken their prey. On the island of Flores, Homo erectus likely competed with Leptotylos robustus, a giant stork that lived in open habitats. This bird not only commanded respect, but also competed for carcasses and small animals. Nights, once a time of terror in the darkness, became safe spaces of warmth and light around the fire. Watching the flames dance may have sparked introspection, abstract thought, and the first glimmers of a sense of future. They lacked articulated language, yet their vocalizations were complex, with a richer variety of sounds than those of a chimpanzee. Beside the fire, using gestures, sounds, and shadows, they imitated animals or reenacted hunting scenes. gathering around the flames may have become the earliest form of communal space, where the group bonded. Homo erectus males were similar in size to females, suggesting a reduction in violent competition. A male no longer ensured his lineage through brute strength. He needed cooperation, alliances, and a lasting bond with his partners. Perhaps it was here, in the savannas and forests they roamed, that pair-bonded love first emerged. Homo erectus infants depended on adult care for years. Having two protective figures greatly increased their chances of survival. Fossil remains show that some individuals reached old age, even when they suffered illnesses or fractures. This means others looked after them. Someone carried water and food to an elder or to an injured mother. From that combination of endurance, cooperation, and shared warmth would rise an even more powerful species. They would be the first to dare to face the giants of megafauna head-on. Era of the giant hunters. 700,000 years ago. Homo heidelbergensis. In the African populations of Homo erectus, natural selection began favoring larger brains and faces with more modern features. Their sturdy bones, sloping foreheads, and powerful jaws revealed a species built to endure a harsh and ever-changing world. Thus emerged a different kind of hominin, taller and more robust than its ancestors, Homo heidelbergensis. Unlike those who came before, this hominin didn't merely survive among giants, it dared to hunt them. Its mind could plan far into the future, and its social cooperation reached levels never seen before. Where a single individual stood no chance against an ancient elephant, Palaeoloxodon reki, an organized group could devise a strategy. The strength of an arm was multiplied by the sharp point of a spear, and shared fear turned into collective courage. Hunting giants required more than muscle. It demanded coordination through shouts, signals, and gestures. Hunting became a deliberate strategy. Surround, apply pressure, wait for the perfect moment. The need to coordinate sparked a proto-language, a series of sounds approaching the beginnings of the human voice. A multi-ton animal could feed an entire clan for days. Distributing that meat came with rules, leadership roles, and perhaps the earliest signs of authority within the group. When their population grew, Homo heidelbergensis began crossing grasslands that today are deserts, such as the Sahara. Back then, the Sahara was very different. Wide rivers flowed through the region. Enormous lakes, like the ancient Megachad, which at its peak was larger than the Caspian Sea, covered the landscape. There was a blend of grasslands and open woodlands inhabited by megafauna, such as Civatherium, an extinct relative of the giraffe, or the giant camel, Camelus thomasi, larger than any living camel species. Homo heidelbergensis left Africa through the lands that are now Egypt and Israel, and from there moved into Europe. It was a world of dense forests, cold climates, and sharply defined seasons, shaped by the swings of the ice ages. Yet, Homo heidelbergensis had the skills needed to thrive. Once established in Europe, they became isolated from their African relatives by climatic and geographic barriers. Over hundreds of thousands of years, they transformed into a species adapted to the cold and to hunting Europe's great fauna. The world was about to meet the true rulers of the Ice Age. Era of endurance, 400,000 years ago. Homo neanderthalensis. The body of this new species, the Neanderthal, was adapted for cold climates, hunting, and stamina. He was shorter, broader, and more compact, a physique that reduced skin surface and conserved body heat far more effectively. His bones grew thick and his muscles powerful. His sloping forehead and heavy brow ridges gave him a fierce appearance, though his mind held remarkable complexity. It was the anatomy of a hunter specialized in close-range confrontations with enormous and dangerous animals, such as woolly mammoths. For days, they trailed herds from a distance, recognizing movement patterns, migration routes, and vulnerabilities. The Neanderthal clan chose the mammoth that nature had already marked as weak, an elder with less strength to defend itself. Through shouts, fire, and thrown spears, they harassed the herd, isolating the selected prey. They used spears designed for close combat hunting. With their whole bodies, they drove the spear into the animal. But Neanderthals did more than endure. They created. Evidence shows they used eagle talons as pendants. These may have been symbols of status, protective charms, or even elements of ritual. For years, it was believed that cave art belonged only to Homo sapiens. But discoveries in Spanish caves proved otherwise. Here, hand silhouettes were found, created by blowing pigment over a hand pressed against the wall, dating to a time before the arrival of sapiens. Stalactites and stalagmites painted with red pigment were also discovered. There is evidence as well that Neanderthals may have created music, or at least rhythmic and melodic sounds. In the caves where they sheltered from European winters, perforated bones have been found. Some researchers believe these are remnants of flutes made from the femurs of cave bears. The Neanderthal brain was equal in size or even slightly larger than that of Homo sapiens, though shaped differently. They were natural experts, capable of remembering vast amounts of information about the landscape and its animals. The Neanderthal hyoid bone, essential for supporting the tongue and producing sound, was almost identical to that of modern humans. This suggests they had the physical ability to produce a wide range of vocalizations. They did not speak as we do. Yet, they had the capacity to build a proto-language with rules and nuance. Their voice was likely deep, with low resonances, and included vowels and consonants similar to ours. Although they were strong and adapted to the cold, around 45,000 years ago, the Neanderthals encountered a new species, and their decline began. At times, a small Neanderthal clan may have spotted a band of tall, unfamiliar-looking individuals, the sapiens. Violence did occur, as shown by Neanderthal fossils bearing wounds caused by sapiens' weapons. Their first reaction was likely suspicion and fear, noticing the physical differences. There were probably shouts, threatening gestures, and displays of weapons between the groups until the smaller one withdrew. When hunting was scarce or winter turned severe, avoiding contact wasn't always possible. Competition over the carcass of a large animal could easily lead to a violent confrontation. Neanderthals held the advantage in physical strength and close combat. Sapiens relied on thrown weapons, striking from a safer distance. Both species were apex predators, meaning they stood at the top of the food chain and depended on the same resources. It may have been the First War, a continent-wide conflict between sapiens and Neanderthals that lasted thousands of years. Territorial predators, like lions, are extremely violent toward competitors. They kill rivals and their young to secure their domain.
Charge forward!
It is ecologically consistent to assume that two intelligent, predatory human species behaved in much the same way. Genetic and archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals were pushed out of their territories and deprived of resources, gradually disappearing. They could not compete with sapiens, who possessed more complex language, formed larger social groups, and used superior technology. Yet, the Neanderthal did not vanish entirely. Part of their lineage mixed with Homo sapiens. All modern humans outside Africa carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. Entire groups rarely blended with one another, but the integration of individual members is highly plausible. A young and solitary Neanderthal, perhaps the lone survivor of a predator attack, might have been found by a band of sapiens. Out of compassion, they adopted him, and over time he became part of the modern human group. His unusual appearance and imposing physique may have inspired attraction, especially if he excelled as a skilled hunter. Children born from sapiens and Neanderthals became a bridge between two worlds, they inherited their father's sturdiness and their mother's quick intelligence. Thus, the Neanderthals disappeared following the arrival of our species on the European continent. But the origin of modern humans was not in Europe. It was somewhere in Africa, under relentless suns and endless savannas. Era of imagination, 300,000 years ago. Homo sapiens. The Homo heidelbergensis populations that remained in Africa gradually evolved into Homo sapiens. Their bodies were tall and slender, built to travel long distances beneath the harsh African sun. But what set them apart was not in their bones. It was in their minds. Where others saw a trace on the ground, they perceived the entire story of the animal that left it, its body, its path, and its exhaustion. They developed symbolic language, complex thought, culture, sophisticated societies, and advanced technology. At the dawn of a decisive era for sapiens, the super eruption of Mount Toba in Sumatra occurred 74,000 years ago, a catastrophe that nearly wiped them out. It was an explosion of unimaginable magnitude. Millions of tons of ash were hurled into the sky, darkening the sun for months. Earth entered a volcanic era that lasted for years. Temperatures dropped, rainfall became unpredictable, and droughts grew severe. In Africa, where groups of Homo sapiens lived, the landscapes changed dramatically. Fertile savannas became arid grounds. Herds of herbivores, crucial to their diet, declined sharply. Genetic analysis suggests that the population of Homo sapiens shrank to only a few thousand individuals in certain parts of East Africa. This means that all modern humans descended from that incredibly resilient group of survivors. It was a ruthless form of selection. Only those who managed to adapt to hunger, cold, and uncertainty succeeded in preserving their lineage. That catastrophic event may have acted as a natural filter, removing the weakest and amplifying resilience and inventiveness in those who survived. Shortly afterward, around 70,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened in a corner of Africa. A seed awakened in the minds of our ancestors. Although the shift was gradual, its effects were so profound that specialists called it the cognitive revolution. A mutation is believed to have altered the way neurons connected, giving rise to more complex language and a more flexible memory. This increased the brain's internal connections, granting the ability to link ideas, invent symbols, and imagine the future. Sapiens moved beyond simple alarm calls and began to combine sounds into sentences with subject, verb, and object. With complex language, human groups organized themselves into bands larger than those of any other hominid. It helped coordinate hunts, establish hierarchies, set social rules, and, most importantly, share stories that bonded the group. Knowledge began to accumulate and pass from one generation to the next. During the cognitive revolution, music also emerged. Perhaps it began with a rhythm. A group of sapiens gathered around a fire strikes the ground with sticks, echoing the rhythm of their footsteps during the hunt. The repeated sound awakens something, a resonance in their bodies, a shared vibration. Then came the voice, a murmur that first imitated the animals of the savannah, and later the wind or thunder. Someone joins in with a whistle. Suddenly, some produce different sounds that weave together. The feeling is born of creating something together, something invisible, yet powerful. Later, more complex instruments emerged, flutes. A child plays with the hollow bones of a large bird, blowing into it without meaning to. Suddenly, air rushes through the tube and produces a sharp whistle. The clan raises its head. This is not the roar of the wind, nor the cry of an animal. It is something new, born of their own hands. In this same era appeared the paintings of animals, traced onto the damp walls of caves. Perhaps they did this to teach the young how prey moved, or where to strike with a spear. Or maybe it sprang from a deeper desire to tell what had been lived and pass it on to those who would come after. All this is what allowed Homo sapiens to leave Africa around 60,000 years ago, colonizing Asia, Europe, and eventually the rest of the planet. They first crossed the Nile corridor and the Sinai, spreading into the Mediterranean Levant. From there, they dispersed in different directions, some towards the Arabian Peninsula and the Near East, others toward the Eurasian steppes. In Eurasian regions, the pact between wolf and human began. Two apex predators, instead of competing to the point of annihilation, forged an unlikely alliance. The boldest wolves approached camps in search of scraps. Gradually, humans saw them as an alert system and as partners in the hunt. In Asia, sapiens reached India and, following the coasts, moved towards Southeast Asia. Around 50,000 years ago, our ancestors arrived on the island of Flores, in what is today Indonesia. The journey required deliberately crossing the sea, likely using very simple boats. Here they encountered a strange environment, inhabited by dwarf elements, stegodon, that had been isolated there for millennia. But what must have surprised them most was another hominin, the tiny Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit, standing barely 1 meter, around 3 feet tall. It likely descended from a population of Homo erectus that reached Southeast Asia nearly 1 million years earlier. Once settled on Flores, their bodies gradually became smaller, since in a place with limited resources, those who needed less food had the best chance of surviving. The arrival of our species in the region coincides suspiciously with the disappearance of this small hominin. Is it possible that our ancestors hunted them? For sapiens, eliminating them could mean more food and fewer competitors. Yet, despite their short stature, the hobbits were not helpless beings. They were an intelligent species. Hunting them would have been more like battling a group of clever, well-armed humans. All evidence suggests that sapiens also hunted stegodon, and with that, the hobbits lost the essential food source they needed to survive. Our ability to cooperate in large groups and plan far into the future gave us an unbeatable advantage. Homo floresiensis, isolated for hundreds of thousands of years, simply could not compete and went extinct around 50,000 years ago. About 40,000 years ago, certain groups of sapiens dared to go even farther and reached Australia by making sea crossings. This journey required intentional navigation in open waters, an extraordinary cognitive and technological achievement. It marked the arrival onto an alien continent populated by a marsupial megafauna. Here lived creatures found nowhere else on Earth, such as the marsupial lion, Thylacoleo carnifex, which stalked through the forests. Across the plains bounded the colossal Procoptodon galea, a 3-meter, almost 10-foot kangaroo, weighing over 200 kilograms or about 440 pounds. Sapiens used fire to drive herds and spears to finish the hunt. Its size made it a highly valuable prize, meat for the entire tribe, along with useful hides and bones. Much later, during the glaciations, other sapiens followed mammoths' herds across a natural bridge of ice and land, the Bering Strait. From Siberia, they headed into the unknown, opening the way to a virgin continent. This is how they reached the Americas, first to the north and eventually the farthest reaches of the south. In only a few thousand years, sapiens became the first creature to inhabit every continent. Over time, adapting to climates and landscapes so vastly different began shaping visible differences in sapien bodies. In Africa, the cradle of humanity, melanin remained abundant, an invisible armor against solar damage. African sapiens retained agile bodies capable of enduring long days of physical effort under an unforgiving sun. In Northern Europe, endless winters and scarce sunlight favored the opposite adaptation. Light skin became an advantage. It enabled the production of vitamin D even under dim light, essential for strong bones. In Asia, the vast range of landscapes from tropical jungles to frozen steppes produced a wide array of adaptations. In eastern regions, eyes developed folds to protect against wind, cold, and the glare of snow. In North America, the chill of the tundra sculpted compact, resilient bodies. In South America, by contrast, diversity was immense. In the high Andes, lungs expanded to make better use of oxygen. In the Amazon forests, endurance against heat and humidity shaped daily life. The journey of Homo sapiens had carried them to every corner of the planet, yet the true revolution had not yet begun. The wild world was about to become a human world. Era of the civilizational dawn, 11,600 years ago. The ice withdrew. In its slow retreat, the dying glaciers returned the land to life, and a new, fertile world emerged. Humanity lived in small nomadic bands that depended on the movements of animals and the seasons of wild fruits. But in the hills of what is now southern Turkey, something impossible was taking place, one of the great mysteries of human history. It was not a cave, but a temple carved by human hands, Göbekli Tepe. It consisted of monumental stone circles, dominated by colossal T-shaped pillars. The pillars were covered with carvings of animals, perhaps guardians, perhaps spirits. Within those circles, nomadic groups may have held rituals that gathered hundreds of people. Those who raised these stones were not farmers. They were the last great hunter-gatherers. Nomads, who according to our understanding, lacked both the social organization and the resources to erect something of such magnitude. We had always believed that humans first settled, then developed agriculture, and only afterward built temples for their gods. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite, a dizzying revolutionary idea. The temple came before the city. What if faith and the need to feed the builders and pilgrims forced humanity to master agriculture? Then, after 2,000 years of use, came the final mystery. The builders of Göbekli Tepe buried it under tons of earth, as if they wished to hide a sacred secret forever. Yet, something on the face of the world had changed forever. The builder's spirit traveled through the memory of clans and generations, only to ignite again, thousands of years later, in Mesopotamia. The first civilization, Mesopotamia, 6,000 years ago. In a dry and unforgiving land, baked by the sun, something was born that would forever change the fate of humanity. This was Mesopotamia, where the floods of the Tigris and Euphrates left behind fertile black mud, yet in their fury could wipe out entire villages. For generations, people lived at the mercy of these forces. But in the minds of sapiens, a new idea began to take root. They should not merely endure nature, they should control it. Through collective effort, they dug canals and built an irrigation network that made abundance possible. Agriculture was no longer just a pact with the earth, it was a victory over it. From this web of canals, like a fruit nourished by ambition, the city was born. Uruk rose as the world's first metropolis, a universe of mud, bricks, and power. And around it, a wall was built, a boundary dividing citizen from outsider. Abundance brought a new problem. Memory alone was no longer enough to record everything produced and distributed. Then, writing appeared. Numbers and accounts were pressed into clay tablets. What had once been words carried away by the wind became an eternal record. Mesopotamia was also the home of the first gods with personal names. They gave meaning to an uncertain world and demanded temples, rituals, and offerings. Anu, Lord of the Sky, Father of the Gods, Guardian of the Stars and the Heavens. Enlil, God of Wind and Storms, Master of the Air that swept across the fields and brought fertility. Inanna, powerful and dangerous, Goddess of Love and War. And Enki, Lord of the subterranean waters and of wisdom, Protector of humankind. At the heart of the cities rose the ziggurats, where the king served as intermediary between gods and people. Kings like Gilgamesh were remembered as heroes, shepherds of humanity, builders of walls, and epic tales. But where there was a granary, envy followed. Where a wall stood, war soon arrived. The cities, children of the same ingenuity, clashed over water, land, and glory. Organized violence, war as an institution, had been born. With it came armies, kings, and gods of battle. The long march from the savannah had reached its end. We no longer wondered what made us human. We knew. We were all of it, creator and destroyer, dreamer and warrior. The inheritance of millions of years had been placed in our hands. Whether our final legacy will be a marvel we build or a silent rune remains to be seen.